Rashford pulls up for three. Boom! Knocks it down.
Curry from the corner at 3. Puts it in.
For overtime. Makes it going. Right.
Welcome to the MVP cast once again from me, Mark Woods. Thank you for joining us for this midsummer edition of the podcast. Hope you're enjoying your seasonal incomings and goings in the sunshine and the rain and the high winds. It is a British summer after all. Lots of coming and goings, of course, amongst British basketball league clubs, both in the men's and the women's side. I mean, there's big signings. Temi Bentley, Carly Samuelson get into London. The shock news just this week, Ryan Smith leaving the Lions to take up a job in the NBA. And of course, the news just as we're recording this, Pat Whelan making the trip north to the Caledonian Gladiators from Leicester. If you want to keep up with all those moves and shakes around domestic basketball, head to our Twitter account, MVP_247, and you'll get it all there. Now, we'll like during the summer months to look at different aspects of British basketball and step away from the pro game. And this time, let's have a look at the next generation. So it's that time of year when our brightest and best are taking part in European Championship competitions around the continent. GB's under-18 women 12th in Division B earlier this month. The under-20 men 8th in Euro B last week under the coaching, of course, the new London Lions women's assistant Krumesh Patel. The under-18 men under Alan Keane starting this Friday night in Portugal, a mix of US and UK based recruits for them. The other teams in actions over the next few weeks. We wish them all the very best of luck. Let's hope for some promotions for all of them. But let's look specifically at our young male talent. What's it like? We saw recently Tosha Nwoma not being drafted in the NBA draft, but a free agent signing for the Detroit Pistons. Still hope that he'll make the league at some point on through that route, through the G League or elsewhere. Cam Hildreth still excelling at Wake Forest, maybe our best chance over the next few years of getting a Brit finally into the NBA. But what's behind them? And let's have a look at this with two experts, two brains in this field. We are our old friend, been on the podcast before, Dave Owen, stat tracking genius. I hope that's a good way of describing you, Dave. He's nodding his head. He said that's fine. And Chris Mays, who's just freshly back from NBA Summer League in Vegas. You know, he's got lots of roles. Chris, you know, former assistant coach in the NCAA. Of course, was technical roles at Solent, to coach in Belgium. You coached lots of players in NCAA one, and focus, Chris. I think I've probably put them pimping you up in the right way here. You know, and understanding that skills development of athletes. And you know, Dave, as we went into this, has put together a hot list of players. So we'll have a look through some of those. But let's put this in context a bit, Chris, to start with you. I mean, as I said, you're just been at Vegas Summer League, so you're seeing some of the best young talent in the world. I mean, talent that's either going to the NBA right away or players who aspire to be there. And you get the chance to talk to coaches and scouts in that and other contexts. When you mention the word British talent, what's the perception outside of our shores?
I think it's always one with interest. You know, I think as a nation for years, we've been very good at finding 6'7" to 6'11" breaths of talent that make their way over. I mean, ever since Bucknell, you even have Joel Freeland, etc. You know, even with the last thing, I mean, he's playing for the Polish national team, but Jeremy fits that caliber as well as that player that can impact within, you know, that circumstances of the league. It trends and it favors them. And I think sometimes also with the development system that we have in the country, you know, it struggles a little bit because of the playmaking abilities of our guards and keeping them in the country a little bit longer and then sending them out to the United States. And especially with Brexit looming and the reality of that, you know, it's always an interesting stop for scouts, recruits, teams to have a look in England, because it is a culture of talent, and it's just it's easy to find, but you know, it's hard to develop.
Do you think, I mean, you mentioned Jeremy Suhan, of course, good season at the Spurs last year, very solid season. And as you said, plays for Poland, American passport, came through the system in this country, Milton Keynes and other places. Do you think that's speaking creditably about a system that, and we'll talk with some of the players that are coming through, but it's maybe sparked some new views on our talent pyramid?
Yeah, I really think so. I think, even just this last thing with Thomas being at the Summer League, nobody expected that. If you said that 2 years ago, the development that he's taken in the Ivy League this year, it's unstoppable. And it's just putting the right people in the right environments. And I think, us as a nation, if we can work on our environment, there is plenty more to come. Because the game is well liked. You see what Sam's doing, the drive that he's keeping at a younger level. If we can control that a little bit more and develop the talent ourselves in the nation and then send them out at the right time, I think it would be a way more profitable for us.
Must give a shout out to Sam Nieder, of course, our good friend at Pipes Fix. Lots of great summer action that he puts together and showcases a lot of that young talent. Dave, you're good at crunching these numbers and evaluating these talents. So we're just going to dive into this hot list you've developed for our best under 25 players. And there's a player at the top of your list. So top rated in terms of the under 25s. He's already played for GB. Senior level, was in the NBA draft this year, withdrew from consideration, but we'll be there, I'm sure, again. And that's Quinn Ellis. When you're evaluating players, let's again dig into the system here. How did you sort of quantify in a quantitative and qualitative way how to compare players of different ages?
Yeah, so it's been an ongoing challenge since I got involved in British basketball in 2014, where I just wanted to answer that question of, first of all, if you take the really simplistic thing of my kind of performance analysis or performance evaluation, whatever terminology you prefer to use, if you take two players that are the same age playing in the same league, then you can look at numbers in various ways and say, okay, that guy outranks that guy. It's fairly simple. I came up with a pretty system I'm happy with, where I factor in the individual performance of the efficiency and the win percentage of the team and a calculation of factors in both, because we've all heard that conversation, well, this guy's stats are better, but this guy's on a winning team. We're all familiar with that from NBA MVP debates and the like. So I kind of came up with a calculation to solve that problem. But then I was like, well, what if one of those players is, let's say, 17 playing in the BBL and one of those players is 32 in the BBL? It's not really fair to expect the same statistical output from a kid as a veteran. So how could we maybe make an adjustment which factors in the age and almost projects the 17-year-old stats once he was post 25 as a fully developed player? So I came up with a kind of age adjustment, which again was not super difficult, but getting the numbers right and getting the weighting right and everything took a while. But then the real challenge came with, okay, when we're talking about, let's say, picking a GB under 20 squad, how do we compare the kid who's playing in Division 1 men to the kid who's playing in Division 2 men to the EABL kid to the kid who's playing in overseas in Europe in some competition like a Michael Bell or something like that? And that's where it got really complex, because what is the value of these numbers and how much does the higher level competition really change the evaluation? Because you can't just default it. You can't just say, okay, well, a kid in Division 1 men is better than a kid in Division 2 men. Well, not necessarily. He may just be in that environment because of geography and all the rest of it. So I've kind of worked away at it, came up with a system that, almost to my amazement, seems to come out accurate nearly every time in terms of kind of placing these players into performance tiers and giving them a kind of globally applicable star rating. And particularly the generations we're talking about, which is kind of the GB junior team, so 03 down to kind of 06 born players on this hot list that we're discussing today. And also these kids are all over the place. So in terms of where they're playing and their levels, so to be able to place them into these kind of tiers is just super helpful for me in terms of knowing, well, which kids should I be giving coverage to, exposure content to help them get scholarships and all that kind of thing.
When you look at, we'll work down in ages and took at each of these tiers simply because your breathtakingly complex spreadsheet, that's how it is. Who for you is, we mentioned Quinn, product of Sheffield. Who's really standing out for you now as these next ones off the rank? Because most of them are, either in, prep school or junior colleges or D1s. I mean, who should we be looking out for?
Yeah, I think it's always a challenge when you go younger and talk about the kind of US high school players, because those are the one kind of flaw, one chink in my armor, in that I can't get the stats. The level is very difficult to define within the high school kind of structure. So they're kind of a bit of an unknown. We kind of knew what they were before they went to high school, maybe playing here. We maybe know what they do for the national team, but they're kind of an unknown until they really get recruited to college, and then we can track them. The one player that's sort of, a few players that are already performing at the college level who we saw for the under-20s this year is James Okonkwo. So, he was at a high major Division 1 at West Virginia. So coming into the under-20s, you think, okay, well, this is a kid who's already getting minutes in a high major. So your expectations are pretty high that he's going to be a standout player for under-20s. And he was absolutely a standout for the under-20s. Chris will give more kind of subjective coaching context than myself as a more casual observer. But, you can see the body type and the athleticism and the shot blocking. The team seemed to function around his skill set and ability, and he was certainly the focal point to my eye. I'm sure Chris can probably elaborate on that.
Just picking up on that, I mean, the two names you mentioned are James and Michael. I mean, obviously, James at D1, product of Reading. Michael at Strasbourg now, product of Richmond. What's the trick in comparing America and Europe? Because, obviously more Brits tend to head stateside, but there's a different kind of development system in Europe. I mean, from a talent evaluation point of view, how do you compare the apples with the oranges?
I think I kind of like Michael Bell's transition at the moment. I think developing in Europe, picking up that European style of game, and then coming over to the United States to bring profit into his game, playing at VCU, it's really going to expand his profile. I mean, he fits the system of VCU. He's able to impact there. He's able to bring a different dimension with his scoring at his size. He's extremely good with the ball in his hands. Love to see him develop maybe off ball, slashing, cutting, a tremendous athlete as well. It just gives him that extra potential going forward. And, Dave talks about James, and I think this is a massive move for James going to North Carolina next season. He's been absolutely fantastic, and also he suits the style of what the NBA is looking for in that undersized 5 at the moment. Somebody that can rim run. He's got a heart of a lion. And what really impresses me about James is his statistical profile over the limited minutes that he did play at West Virginia, and now coming into a system like at North Carolina where you're backing up probably one of the best bigs, but you've still got 2 years left to increase your game. And he's been someone that, if he ends up in the NBA, I wouldn't be surprised, just because of, the environment and the situation he has put himself in.
I mean, obviously he's coming off an under-20 campaign as well. Come back to essentially what we were saying about Vegas. What do you think again, college recruiters, scouts, people are tucking numbers away when they look at these underage European championships? You're seeing this in your own eyes. What are people taking away from this in terms of the long-term projection?
Well, I think with James, I mean, is it true that he's the first ever one to get a triple-double for Great Britain in an international tournament? I mean, when people do that, that opens up your eyes. And it makes people follow you. And it's like, okay, you're showing a different style of game. You're showing that not only can you perform at the NCAA level, but you can also perform within the higher tiers of European basketball. And the best thing about national team basketball is very systematic. It's very hard. You play the tournament's very inter-based. It's not like AAU tournaments or something where it's kind of like a free-for-all. It's a dogfight. If you ever go to one of these AAU things, there's more structure, there's more ways to showcase who you are, but also there's identity and everything. And you can really see that within the players that play within this tournament. So I think, teams are more understanding of what the player can be. And, this last tournament for James has really shown probably the caliber of player he can actually be.
When you go down your list, Dave, of the sort of 03, 03, or 03 or 04 born talents, and those two at the top, what's the projection below that? I mean, are there names that are standing out for you that you think, they're on an upward trajectory here that could move them up, or they're exciting you with the numbers?
Yeah, I think that those are the three names, like we've mentioned: Quinn Ellis, James Conco, Michael Bell. Those are the three real standout talents that, they've done enough at a level to show, we should be holding them in a higher regard. That's not to say some of the other players are not at that level. It's maybe they've just not had the opportunity to play at a higher level to really showcase themselves. But looking at the under-20 squad and sort of what I expected based on their performances domestically and then what they went and did, Victor Nduku and Lane Campbell were probably two of the big names kind of below that. Louis Tucker would probably be thrown in there as well as that kind of next tier down on our list. And, all three impressed me, certainly, at the under-20s.
Well, especially with Victor, I mean, he's a player that's come through, Charnwood and the Manchester, and, homegrown talents. In that evaluation, when you've pulled those apart, what does that domestic competition, Dave, sit? I mean, does that weigh you down? Does it push you up? I mean, what's the weight that you put against some of our talent academies, particularly somewhere like Charnwood, who has a reputation for developing talent?
Yeah, so basically the way it works, every competition level has a ceiling in terms of no matter what you do in that competition, you can only achieve a certain rating. So you can't go and get a 5-star rating from the EABL. It is all dependent on the level of competitions. So there's also always a highest performance tier you can achieve each level. And then that equates to a kind of global rating of what that means on a global scale and what levels you could potentially jump up to from there. So it's always relative to the level, and it's not that you can't kind of outperform your level, but there should always be a ceiling. We shouldn't be able to say, the best player in the ABL is automatically an NBA prospect if they've not played any senior basketball at that point. It's all relative.
How do you see that jump in terms of, Chris, like being a prospect? And something, again, we say Charnwood or other clubs in the EABL. For you, is that grounding, delivering talent that can make that next leap? Maybe in the right situation, maybe with extra coaching, maybe through extra competition.
Yeah, it's kind of like with Victor as well. I mean, he ended up at North Dakota. I mean, if you look at him, he's I think college coaches would salivate over the look of a 6'8", 6'9", 4 stretch man that can shoot the ball, very talented. I mean, obviously it didn't work out for him, and now he comes back. My question would be why that kind of happened, because, and also now he is back. You can't take that talent away from him. He's still got it. Is it intrinsically? Is it something that he can, because now we can see whether coming back, being with Leicester. I mean, obviously it worked in the women's game with Holly. She came back and has found great success leaving Oregon. But these guys, it's a big jump. It's a big transitional jump. And every time, I mean, when I was recruiting for Division I schools, sometimes I would used to say to these kids, come to the smaller schools and play, because you're going to impact straight away. And then if in 2 years you outgrow us, then please leave. Please go to the bigger schools. The transfer portal is real. It's an actual thing that can really project you moving forward. So either way, you're helping our program, and if you love it, then please stay. But for me, it's that adjustment straight away. He seemed like one of the guys that was going to adjust straight away, physically and ability-wise, and it just didn't work out. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how he goes with Leicester, how he breaks into that rotation moving forward, because what you see is all there. So, I just don't know if it's the contrast of the biggest change of coming into, or maybe picking the wrong conference. I mean, do we have to, we have a lot of statistical generation and stuff like that, but is there more need for greater, deeper understanding of actually where he's actually sending them, and organizational factors of how actually to develop these kids whilst they're in this 4-year process?
And amongst that under 18 plus, so above the under 18 group still, Dave, is obviously you're tracking them year to year. And when you find, in some cases there are players who make a leap, and it might be that they've just finished growing, so they find some more physicality, or perhaps they get a different coach who just unlocks something. Where is that reflected statistically? Is it always just numbers, or is there other things with some of the players that you've looked at that you've picked up and go, yes, we can see the X factor that's been unleashed in their development?
So in terms of kind of year-on-year progress, the kind of age adjustment made assumes a level of growth at every year until they hit 25. But obviously, for some players, that will be an incremental year-on-year one. Some people will make a gigantic leap in 1 year, but it almost, let's say it's a plus 10, or to keep it in simple terms. Some people would achieve that an 8 and then a 2 and then nothing. Some people do it 1 a year over 10. So that kind of gradual growth occurs completely differently in different players. Some people make giant leaps. Some people go like 3, 3, 3, 1. You can see the kind of logic of what I'm saying. I do need to backtrack slightly because I missed Amaku Welsh when I was mentioning the top players of the previous kind of tier. It's just because he's slightly younger than the other guys, and he's certainly impressed in the under-20s as well.
Chris, as a recruiter, put that hat on for us now. And okay. Do you like players who make a leap, or are you suspicious of players that maybe find something that before that they weren't at that level? What's the mathematics in your head?
I don't know. It's adapting to their environment. That's the biggest thing. Whenever you look at even with Jeremy, going back to him, I mean, the one thing that he was always unique at was conquering a level that he changed. That was a talent that he had. And it is that ability that when they step up, I mean, Quinn Ellis, nobody really watching him was kind of surprised he performed like that against Serbia. He has it in him, and putting him in that environment and that level brings the best out of him. Going back to Dave, what Dave said about Zamaku, what I'm really looking forward to looking at with Zamaku is his ability to stay consistent for a longer period of time. He started off very well in Division B Championship, and then his numbers declined once people found out who he was. So I think sometimes it is always a gamble, because you just too many factors of understanding how they're going to react when they get out there. Some people thrive on that. Some people thrive on the change of environments. But it really is to do with fit. And I gotta big up Chris Haslam a lot when it comes to that. His understanding of British players and bringing them on and actually getting them to perform to professionals within a conference like the Big Sky. I think he's been very, very consistent over the 11 years he's been there to be able to do that with players. So, I think it's where you send them. Reduces the surprise limit, but yeah, I think, and also who you send them with. I think the big shock happens, but some of them are. I think that's where if they're actually going to be players, as 90% of this game happens between your ears.
I mean, Zamaku, obviously had sporadic but fairly minimal minutes for London Lions last season. Now he goes to George Washington, but he's been around really good role models. I'm sure you can't help but learn if you're playing against an experienced big like a Sam Decker on a daily basis, and and understanding the full range of that experience. Does that help? I mean, do you think in terms of that adjustment, and does it help in the same way in terms of the playing adjustment?
I think the experience of the players, because the coaches can't do everything, and I think the experience of the players that learn, I think that's a fantastic advantage for these players coming up, already playing professionally and stuff like that. I think the one thing that they have to relate to very quickly is all of a sudden they become the key guy. Instead, there's not so much pressure with Zamaku playing at London because he's got Sam Decker standing next to him. So they need a bucket, they're going to Sam. However, now when you become that focal point of the team and everything, that's where your character really shows out. And I think that's where that's the next adjustment and the delivery that college basketball kind of gives them.
What about that under-18 crop, Dave? I mean, you mentioned Zamaku of that young ones. Who else was really stepping forward at that, I guess even down to 2006 born list?
Yeah, so the GB Under-18s final 12 has actually been announced today, so it's quite timely looking through that list of some of the players we'd maybe expect to perform. I think the three that kind of jump out in terms of my list, and they are in high school, so it's tough, but based on what they did here before they went over, Latrell Davis, Ben Michaels, Tyrese Lacey, who've all kind of played for GB previously and looked like special talents. So really, Tyrese Lacey is just a personal favourite of mine in terms of playing style. Undersized guard, he's just fantastic to watch. We saw a little bit of him at the Hoops Fix All-Star Classic. So really excited to see what those three do. But yeah, there's some interesting names on the list announced today. Matt Goodwin's a name that's sort of starting to emerge as well. Seb Ebenalo, I think probably one of the most slept on players in the country. Mosiah King-Danchi. There's quite a few names on that list that are going to be very interesting, and obviously for a lot of people it might be the first time they've seen them in a GB jersey.
You were nodding quite a lot there when Dave was talking about Tyrese, Chris. I mean, is he a player that we should really start to pick up on?
Yeah, Tyrese is a very interesting prospect. He has the ability to continue to develop at a very high level. So I'm really, really interested to watch him perform at this championship, and to see how he can handle that 7-day scouting, impact and everything, because it does tell you a lot more about the kid and the character, and if they're really willing to adjust to their environment that they put themselves in.
Under 17s, Dave. You've got one name really standing out at the top of your list in your evaluations.
Yeah, Manny Hoses, who's at the NBA Global Academy. Very interesting one. I actually spoke to one of the coaches there because it's just a level I'm not familiar with, NBA Global Academy. You can make the assumption that it's a pretty good level because it's got the NBA tag on it. But yeah, they said he was developing really well. They're really happy with him. Interestingly, he's on the reserve list for the GB Under-18s, not in the final 12, which is an interesting one from the outside looking in. There's obviously going to be reasons for it that I'm not aware of.
What's that setup? When you look at that? I mean, I don't really know much about it either. What do you see coming out of that, Chris?
I think the NBA Global Academy is actually built because of the insecurity of sometimes Division I basketball and what they produce coming out to the NBA. The NBA have done a big thing now with the G League continues to grow. They're finding prospects early, maybe as well with NIL deals. Kids come out a little bit spoiled. the global, the NBA are doing a very good job at actually strategically developing their own kids now for the NBA and to be able to profit from them. So it's like, I think it's a very, very good structure system. It gives them, a vast experience, training facilities, everything that is established all over the world. And yeah, there's so many different ways now to go to the NBA. And I think it's, to play at the highest level and more organized, structured events like this and what they produce is, only benefits the game. And it's something that as a talented prospect, I would always look into.
I mean, many of our under 16, 17 players, I mean, they're either in high school or in the EABL. For the remainder of that group, Dave, who's the names you think are, at least statistically and from your eye test, are on that cusp that could be ones who emerge as that fresh young talent?
I think it's the hardest generation to really assess because we don't see statistics. The under-17s, that's the first real look at we get at them in terms of, coming into that EABL world, maybe playing a bit of D2, D1 men. But the under-16 generation before that, so, the long camp list for the GB under-16s this year, names you probably don't know. And even myself is not overly familiar with. You might see them a little bit in the Aspire tournaments and things like that. But those are always the biggest unknowns that when that GB under-16 team is, on GB basketball TV and we can get a look at them. Just based on where they are, I think you've got Nathaniel Janogly, who I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, who's at Brewster Prep. And then you've also got Julius Kamani, who I believe is a 7-footer at Montverde Academy. So with my very little knowledge of US high school basketball, I believe those are two pretty big programs. And you've got a 6'8" kid and a 7-foot kid. So if they're in the 12 and the under 16s, you would imagine those would be the two that would be interesting to go look at.
Any others amongst our high school preps that you think we should get excited about, Chris?
No, there's so many vast names and just trying to find them all the time. I mean, in the prep school, for me, maybe Luke Bamboy, if I said his name right. Luke Bamboy, I think he's sitting there now with, I think it's 12, 13 offers to high major Power 5 schools. Has great shot blocking ability. The development of him over the last couple of years, being in the States, has come with the body and the coaching. I think, he's definitely somebody that people should really have a look at.
Well, there are so many names. We can keep our fingers crossed that they come through. We all want another NBA star. And let's hope it's somewhere located on Dave's spreadsheet. If you want to get all of Dave's stats, and they are brilliant, and I cannot recommend them enough, head to daveowenbasketball.co.uk and you will find a world of information. Chris, you can get on Twitter at ACMays21. Chris, quickly, what's next?
For me, it's waiting for this marriage visa to open up, and slowly being able to integrate into the United States. So my wife at the moment, she's working in northern Colorado as well. So I'm still very heavy, but I'm in a very fortuitous place because living where I live, you've got 4 or 5 conferences around me. So I'll be out scouting, watching, and obviously praying that we can continue to develop these English kids as the best that we can.
And put all that smoozing from Vegas Summer League to good use. That's what it's all about. The networking. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for your insights, and stay well. Enjoy your summer. Hit the beach.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
That is it for this edition of the MVP Cast. Don't forget you can get all our previous editions at mvp247.com or via your smart speakers or your preferred podcast providers. If you're heading to the beach, download a few episodes, sit by the pool, hours of fun guaranteed. If you want to reach out to me, you can get me on Twitter at MarkBritBall. We're in an extended break for our summer holidays. We'll be back in September. But for me, Mark Woods, thank you so much for listening, and it's goodbye.